Welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the law firm Abercrombie and Sanchez, PLLC. You can find us on the internet at astxlegal.com or by calling 1-888-981-7509. Your hosts are Bryan Abercrombie and Sanchez. Bryan has been practicing law for 18 years and is board certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization in the area of family law. Sam has been practicing for 13 years, is licensed in both Texas and Florida, and is a certified mediator. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and all views are the opinion of the hosts. It's not designed to provide legal advice for your particular legal matter, and it should not replace the advice of competent counsel. Welcome, and we hope you enjoy the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast.
Good morning and welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Abercrombie, and with me as always is the co-host, the stuffing to my Thanksgiving turkey, Sam Sanchez. Sam, how you doing?
I'm not doing too bad. The gravy to your roll. That's what I am.
Yes, the gravy to my mashed taters.
That's right.
Or maybe I'm your sidekick. I don't know.
No way, dude. I'm like the onion strings on your green bean casserole.
Okay. So anyway, we've been out for a while. We haven't recorded one in a while, so we thought we would make this the Megalodon episode because you know how a shark is. You know, you got a great white, and that's a big shark, right?
This is true.
But a Megalodon. Now, you've seen that movie, right?
I have. That's a pretty big shark.
Yes, so we're going to make this the Megalodon episode. So we'll hit a wide range of topics so we can cover a lot of stuff. So hopefully it'll make it worth it since we've been on a hiatus for a little while. I mean, not without good reason. I mean, we've all had a lot going on. So I've had 2 trials. You've had a trial or 2. We've been doing some stuff. Been making it rain in the legal world.
We have definitely tried to, anyways.
All right, so let's get this going. First, let's talk about Brittney Spears. We've been covering Brittney Spears a while, right?
Oh yeah, our favorite hottie naughty.
Yes. So, okay, let's talk Brittney. All right, Brittney.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, so much has transpired since we last kind of covered her case. You know, we've touched on guardianship a bunch, and the effects that it can have, the restrictions, and obviously, you know, I know she put out a thank you video to her fans, which was well deserved, because obviously, without these people bringing that much needed attention to her case, it probably would be a different outcome right now.
Yeah, the conservatorship. If you don't know, the conservatorship for Brittney Spears is over 14 years later. She's now free and she's stronger than yesterday, Sam.
That's right. Yeah, she could. I think one of the funny quotes that she had was, you know, I can finally have cash and have my debit card back. Which is, you know, we've talked about the restrictions of guardianship, and obviously Brittney was in a very restrictive guardianship. She had people that, you know, controlled what type of medical treatment she could receive.
Right, her reproductive rights even.
Yeah.
But one thing I thought was interesting in an article I read on it was now her attorney's just kind of talking about potentially going back and seeing if there's been any mishandling or malfeasance going on within the guardianship, because apparently the California law is changing to the effect of if there was some malfeasance going on and they misled the court, usually they can't go back, apparently, from what I understand from the reading of the article. They can't typically go back and ask for, you know, I guess maybe expungement of fees or damages or whatever for malfeasance that occurred in the past. However, if they find that they misled the court, so if they misled the court on the annual accounting and all that, then they can open the can of worms and go back and see if there's damages or things. And additionally, I think her father is petitioning for additional costs. And there's a hearing coming up, I think next month or the month after, that will decide whether or not the lawyers get paid and the conservator gets paid.
Yeah, I mean, I think they said like total for the 14-year period, it was some insane number like $22 million. So, yeah. You know, that's a tremendous amount. The funny thing is, it's not funny, but I mean, you know, obviously there's a lot of documentaries out there. Who knows whether they got the information right, but her estimated net worth over that time period was around $250 million. Her current estimated net worth is about 60 million. So that's a lot of hands in the cookie jar to take $200 million or give or take. So
right.
what her lawyer's doing is probably pretty smart.
Right. If her net worth is increased and or, and you're managing a lot of assets and a lot of Brittney, I mean, you've got all kinds of intellectual property there, brand, a whole thing. You could amass probably a serious amount of fees during that time. But the problem, I guess, when you're in a conservatorship, like we talked about before, you're paying for your lawyer, you're paying for conservators' lawyers, you're paying for any experts' lawyers. You're paying a lot of lawyers there.
Yep.
And then a lot of potential professional accountants or professional auditors to look at this stuff. And then that just starts sucking money.
Well, and you know what? A lot of people don't understand when they let's say as an example, you really have a legitimate reason. I'm not saying Brittney's wasn't, but let's say that, you have a parent who is suffering from dementia and you're trying that, or starting to get into that stage of dementia or Alzheimer's. You want to get a guardianship, you get it in place and you're their trustee. There's a tremendous amount of exposure for you as a trustee, and you really have to be very diligent and very above board on what you're doing and what you represent to the court. Because you don't just, you open yourself up to some criminal liability as well, depending on how you're behaving in managing somebody else's estate.
Yeah, if you mistreat an elderly person who has is obviously in a vulnerable position, then you can be held accountable for it. Which may lead us to our celebrity divorce du jour of the week, right? I wanted to talk about the Erika Jane divorce.
Oh yeah,
good old housewife, pop star, whatever she is.
Real Housewife of Beverly Hills, right?
I know you're a big fan of Erika Jane and Tom Girardi and the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
I can't say I haven't watched it. I have a wife and she definitely encourages that.
Me too. We've seen many of them. But apparently, I don't know if you're a fan of her pop star career, but apparently that was being financed by some alleged malfeasance on the part of her attorney husband, Tom Girardi, huh?
Yeah, and the difficulty obviously that she's facing is, and obviously they're involved in a divorce proceeding as well. So she's got a whole lot of freaking irons in the fire. But, this opens up a great question that we've kind of mentioned in different podcasts, which is, culpability or exposure that a spouse has for another spouse's actions during a marriage. Right prior to divorce, you got to understand, especially in Texas, as we're going to kind of like focus in on this moment because California law is a little different. But, it's a community property state. And when people hear that, they always want to say, well, that means we split stuff 50-50. That's not what it means. It means that you own what they're doing 100% and they own what you're doing 100%. That's income, debts, encumbrances, and sometimes even that type of behavior. So, she wants to say, hey, my money's my money, but he did with his money. And that's going to be a really interesting case. When it happened, what did she know? I know there's a lot of questions still outstanding she's got to face.
Right. And I know he did, a ton of stuff that are big no-nos in the lawyer game, which is, keeping clients' trust money, keeping their settlement money, all of things that are potentially going to get him obviously disbarred. Like the next question I have is, okay, he's battling Alzheimer's in a assisted living facility. He's not going to recover, obviously, from that. So I guess the question is, can she divorce him? One, and two, does the liability fall to her after he's gone? I mean, he's clearly not going to he has no ability to defend himself. He's got no ability to, make the potential victims whole. So what happens? Do they come after her? I mean, I don't know if she had a prenup or anything like that or anything. Yeah,
no prenup. They didn't have a prenup at all. That was one of the big things that she was like, why would I get a prenup? He's got all the money. I don't have anything. I think when they met, she was like a waitress or something. This guy was like a super powerful attorney in California, had made millions and millions of dollars with these big landmark personal injury cases, supposedly. But, honestly, I think she does, or at least her estate is going to have some substantial exposure. Because if you look
she's being sued by the bankruptcy trustee handling the bankruptcy case for the law firm for $25 million, and she currently makes around $600,000 for the housewives and all of what she's doing. So that's a lot of years of work.
Well, not only that, but this is a long-term marriage. And so you got to figure if he really is incapacitated, and let's say, in California, divorces can take a freaking long time. She's on the hook for spousal maintenance. This guy is no longer employed, can't practice law. He's in assisted living. If he lacks capacity, at the heart of marriage law is contract law, right? So when you look at
years
that,
of marriage.
yeah, and you look at it and you say, I lack the capacity to be able to, really have this contract and understand what's happening. She could be on the hook for lifetime support. So if he's living in assisted living, whether they're divorced or not, she could be footing his bill for quite some time.
Yeah, she could be in for a rough haul.
Yeah, and you're watching the show, Brian, I guess one of the things that was really kind of concerning to me as a lawyer, first of all, look, when you're in a divorce, everything that you say, everything that you post, everything that you show can potentially be used against you. And so that somebody would let her, and I get it. Look, she's like, this is the only way I make money. I got to do the show. But it was just some of the craziest stuff I've ever seen, to be in a divorce proceeding and have additional litigation and participate in that type of an environment. I mean,
and go on a show where you're answering questions about it. It's one thing to be on the housewives shows and they flip from cocktail party to cocktail party, or charity event to charity event, and they're all having their altercations and they're all
throwing cake at each other
or whatever they're doing, shopping, or complaining about what somebody was wearing or how they acted. But it's another thing to go on the after the show where they interview and ask everybody questions and then start getting into it. I mean, I think she tried to avoid the tough questions and didn't answer a lot of stuff, but at least from the one that I saw. But I mean, she could be in a very, very bad way. I mean, there's the scary thing for her is that obviously she had nothing to do with this law firm. She doesn't practice law. She's not an attorney. She had no idea probably had no idea what the financial dealings with the firm were. I mean, I'm sure she's looking at it. Well, I got this big baller husband who's making all this money and he's financing my pop singer career or whatever. And then come to find out, the blooms off the rose, and it was all financed with smoke and mirrors.
Yeah. So, well, and other people's money. And that's the big challenge is, so if you look at it and she says, hey, I have some assets, which I would be surprised if the bankruptcy court doesn't currently have all of those assets tied up. But, based on that, she's just trying to salvage anything she can really from that. And it may all be exposed based on the fact that she was married when all this happened. I mean, how do you separate what's hers and his?
And I think he represented a number of plaintiffs in a plane crash, I want to say, and didn't pay out the settlements.
Yeah,
so that could be substantially,
like burn victims, something else.
It could be a substantial amount of money.
Yeah, and I mean, as a lawyer, obviously you have a fiduciary duty to your client to, turn over all that profit if it's theirs. So the fact that he was taking in these awards and utilizing them for whatever he wanted, whether it was to finance her career or to pay the freaking mortgage, it doesn't matter. It wasn't his money to spend. And so, she's reaping the whirlwinds for his actions, and all because she was married to him at that time. Whether she knew or not, it doesn't maybe open her up to culpability, but it definitely opens the estate up.
She might need to marry like Russian oligarch money or Jeff Bezos money to get herself out of this one if she's going to get remarried, right?
Yeah, I hear he's looking for somebody, so she could file an application there. I'm sure that list is long.
Yeah, but wow, it's crazy to think how these people live, and it's also crazy to think that the kind of predicaments them. I mean, she's not the first housewife to get herself into some legal trouble.
No.
Yeah, and I have some. I'm not without empathy for her. I mean, I understand that she probably had no idea what was going on, but at the same time, it is what it is, and she did profit from all of that. So,
yeah, I mean, it's a terrible situation to find yourself in, especially in that lifestyle. And it's so public, I mean, it's not like she can say, no, I wasn't living high off the hog while all these other people weren't getting money for their suffering. She really was.
She was living. I mean, she was financing a pop star career, and I don't know if she had any. Did she have any following? Was she a popular pop star? I know she had this thing, and she was trying to do music, but was it a joke, or was it?
Yeah,
or was it legit?
She's no Brittney. That's all I can
Right.
say.
No
but,
kidding. No kidding.
But whether or not she sold any albums, made a profit, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that the bankruptcy court is having a whole field day with all that stuff.
Right.
But the big thing on that, and we've touched on this before, is family law is one of these unique areas of law where many areas can collide at the same time. So when you look at a case like hers, you're looking at a guardianship proceeding for capacity to enter into that. You're looking at civil law, and those lawsuits penetrating the divorce process. And then you're still looking at her claims against her husband, right? So she's still trying to get divorced. So all these are being handled by the same court, really, for all intents and purposes, at the same time. And then you layer on a bankruptcy. So the bankruptcy as a federal court is taking care of all of it. It's saying, look, we go first. We get to decide all this estate stuff. Then you can get divorced. Then you can sue her civilly. And so like having all these pieces is like the perfect storm. You ever wanted to do a case study on how all these courts relate and overlap on one another? This is a good one.
I mean, she'll be lucky to walk out of there with her life is so public. I would think as soon as the vultures get all over, I would think that the all the fancy stuff's going to go.
Well, she sure wants to get divorced. She wants her money to be hers. But like I said, in California, there is lifetime support, and so when you look at that situation and you have a disabled spouse, what does the court do with that? Well, he can't work anymore. He's going to be penniless, very likely. So does he get his share of her income? We'll flip it. If it was a guy getting divorced, right, and the woman has special needs or is, disabled in some way, typically the court is going to award lifetime support. So, these are things that she's wrestling with as a bread earner now. And I'm not saying it's role reversal because, hey, we're in a new age and women typically make a crap ton more than guys are making. But it's definitely something that, has got to weigh.
She's certainly obviously more marketable and everything like that. So celebrity dollar wise, she's probably could do pretty well. If you want their house, I think it's been, it's been reduced in price from 13 million down to 8 million. So you might be able to slide in there for a cool 8 million. You want to buy their place.
The court appointed a receiver and said, sell that bad boy, huh? Well,
oh yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the other challenges that people face in a divorce is, let's say you get yourself into a situation like she's in, and the court in a bankruptcy or even just in a divorce is looking to liquefy assets to make them easily divisible, right? Because if there's not funds and we need to pay debts, the court's going to say, sell stuff. Well, court typically in that situation is going to appoint a receiver. What a receiver does is it's somebody who's, sometimes it's a lawyer who's hiring, real estate people to sell it. Sometimes it's a different realtor who has experience with the court, but they sell it quick. I'm telling you what, you appoint a receiver in a property situation like that, and courts are going to sell that asset really quick because they're going to jump through prices until it's sold. In Texas, we always have those, there's certain days of the month where all these properties that are going up for auction are going to be out at the courthouse. And so you'll see all these huge crowds of people out there trying to, be the next fixer-upper.
Get themselves a discount.
Yeah, but so, I mean, these guys are super experienced men and women who are selling these assets. So if you get yourself in that situation where you need the money, or in the reverse, you don't want it sold very quickly, you better have a good lawyer who's going to help you through that process to try to minimize the effect of what a receiver can do.
Yeah, because the receiver gets paid a fee outside of, oftentimes they'll take more than just the regular real estate commission.
Yep. So it's definitely something to consider as a client or as an attorney to advise them and tell them, hey, look, you want to try to maximize your end game. And a lot of times it's not forcing it through the courts.
All right. So let's see here. Her big song, big hits. Let's see.
She's like a pretty hot little mess or something like that. Pretty hot mess or
hot mess, pretty mess.
That's it. I think that was like her song that like I've ever heard anywhere. She may have more. I'm assuming she does.
I'm not super impressed so far.
It's not your Euro. You're not a,
Sounds like Euro club dance music.
Yeah, I think that's what she was going for. Apparently she's like,
Seems heavily synthesized to me. It's Snow Crush.
She's like the Hoff, man. She's like the Hoff. She's going for that sweet Swedish market.
Snow Crush bouquet, Sam.
No, there's only one of them, and they're way better than that.
All right, so I think we've killed Erika Jane, or gone as far as we can go with Erika. So we'll come back to her later as this lawsuit unfolds.
Yep.
It is definitely a legal quagmire. It's going to make the careers of some attorneys, I would suspect. All right, so let's go down to something that's a little bit more local. The ASTROWORLD situation down there with Travis Scott, down here in my neck of the woods, Houston.
Yeah, $750 million lawsuit filed, and that's just one of them for, really kind of almost a class action against the producers and Travis Scott. And I think it names quite a few people in the lawsuit. Obviously a tremendous tragedy that, happens down in Houston. I think there's a lot of culpability all the way around for kind of
apparently they just started rushing the gate and they couldn't get them, I don't know if that's a failure of security or, kind of what the,
there's so much out there, Brian. Obviously there's reports that the chief of police for Houston met with Travis Scott and his people before the concert and said, hey, we've got problems. Now, this is because historically this concert has been pretty rowdy. His concerts are fairly rowdy. He's kind of one of those, and I've been to many of these kind of rowdy concerts where, there's a mosh pit. There's always going to be people passing out. There's this crush of people. But in this situation, it seems like there was a lot of concern.
I don't think I've been in a mosh pit since Rage Against the Machine. How long ago was that?
We're dating ourselves, but the situation is, when you buy a concert ticket, there's this massive amount of text typically on the back of a concert ticket or digitally, right, if you're getting it digitally, and a lot of that is waivers right, that you don't really understand or care to read because it's your favorite band. But that's the thing that these individuals are going to have to fight and try to overcome is, that negligence claim on the waivers that they probably.
So 10 people died due to crowd compression, which is, trying to squeeze together and, including a 9-year-old boy. So they had a 9-year-old boy at this concert. And 125 people have now joined a lawsuit against Travis Scott and Drake, seeking about $750 million.
Yeah. And, the situation is, you're talking about intentional infliction of emotional distress. These people who saw their people die, they're sitting squashed up next to somebody who's been asphyxiated and is dead in the crowd, but they can't move. And so you're sitting there up against the dead body and you're trying to beg people to stop a concert, get people out. I mean, these are legitimate claims that these lawsuits are bringing forth. I mean, some of them I think are going to be vetted because, there's always people see a payday and they want to jump up and go, hey, yeah, I want part of that. But, legitimately, what do you pay somebody for experiencing something like that or losing a child? This was a 9-year-old child that was on the shoulders of his father. And, right, because of the crowd sway, he fell, kid gets trampled to death. I mean, these are horrible experiences that nobody wants. You just, your favorite band, your favorite artist, you're like, hey, let's go have a good time. It's going to be something incredible. And what you take, I think, preliminarily, most people, when they go to these types of events, think, well, it's safe. People have thought about this and it's going to be a pretty safe environment. There is enough security. There is enough barriers or whatever it may be.
And they also probably think that they have enough insurance to cover anything that could potentially happen. But if you're talking about, I guarantee you they don't carry $1 billion worth of insurance on this, event. There's no way.
Heck, some of these people are even self-insured. They don't even get a separate insurance policy because they're like, we're going to make so much off the concert. If something happens, we should be able to pay it out of the proceeds. There's no way. And I get that it was a sold out show. It's a massive venue, but there's just,
I get what he's trying to do. And I get, he's trying to bring some life back to the city of Houston and energize his hometown and stuff. And I get that. But yeah, like you said, I think when you go to these venues for these concerts, you assume that, well, they've thought out crowd control, they've thought out security, they've thought out, this kind of stuff, and it's not going to get out of hand. And, this particular one did.
Well, and obviously they may not have resulted in deaths, but we know that this is not like a unique occurrence, that as they go through, and not just to Travis Scott. There are plenty of concerts where you want to go through the rock genre, rap genre, whatever genre it is. I don't care if it's a Celine Dion concert. If you're not sitting in a chair and you're up and there's an open area where people can congregate, what they want to try to do is get as close to this artist as they possibly can. And when you talk about bodies being squashed in together, I mean, there's nothing really you can do as an individual when the crowd starts.
Yeah, they had this. They had a documentary a number of years ago about an English soccer match where two teams were playing, and Liverpool, I think, was involved in it. And they opened one part of the back section, and for fans to come in, I think it was Hillsborough or something like that. And the crowd just was pushing and pushing and pushing, and all the people in front of the fence there at the end of the grandstand all got crushed against the fence. And that's basically similar to what happened here. I think all 50,000 people are all pushing into one area, and then people are going to get for lack of a better word, crushed.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what happened. They were sitting there and they talk about your lungs in that situation. What most people want to try to do is they want to try to struggle excuse me, against the weight of a crowd. But what that ends up doing is it pushes you further towards exhaustion, because then you want to try to take deeper breaths, and that just allows the crowd to compress you even further. And that's usually where people are passing out. I mean, I don't know how many concerts I've been to. Obviously, I'm more of a kind of, 80s hairband kid. I'm pretty old. But, like how many times we would be passing, people overhead if you were at the very front because they'd passed out, whether it was heat, whether it was because they couldn't breathe because the crowd was so squished in. And
right.
Luckily this never transpired. We never had that kind of, people, get, killed or trampled. But it's very easy. You get that many people in place. And they said, like they were looking at video and watching the crowd. And this is something that his concerts are actually famous for, is this synchronized movement of the crowd, thousands and thousands of people swaying or moving or compressing backwards and forwards. And so, if you're the tip of the spear on that, what do? There's nothing really you can do. And security people, obviously,
I guess he's getting their hands full. I guess he's getting some shade thrown his way because he continued to perform.
45 minutes, they said, or 42 minutes after
they declared it a mass casualty event. Yeah. I don't know if you're on stage, if you can know exactly what's going on, in the crowd, but
I think we'll see a documentary or two come from this situation.
Oh, I'm sure there's always a documentary or two, right?
Well, and here's the deal, in the modern era, everybody is a filmmaker. Why do I say that? Because everybody has a phone most often that has a camera that can record video. And so everybody is a news outlet. Everybody is a real time, hey, this is happening right in front of me. And I guarantee you, in a concert situation, I don't know, the last concert that I went to, Brian, yours are a little wilder than mine, but like everybody had their freaking phone out. It's like nobody can watch the concert anymore. Everybody's got to watch it through the screen on their phone while they record it, even though they're probably never going to play those videos again. Hey. But I guarantee you, everybody who had a phone, who was at that, who had a ticket that they can track down, is getting subpoenas for the videos that they took. Because, I mean, it's just going to be a tremendous amount of evidence to sift through.
Yeah, and then look at the potential plaintiffs. You've got, obviously all the concert goers. So you've got 125, potentially more. Then you've got, who's got potential liability. Of course, the artists, they're going to go after their production companies. They're anybody and everybody who's associated with that artist. Then you've got the venue potentially. NRG Stadium is pretty well-known venue. So
well, and you talk about one of the things that they raised is like, hey, well, shouldn't the city of Houston have some culpability if they identified that there was a risk? Why didn't they freaking do something about it? And Houston sitting back there saying like, this is a private event. Like, unless, somebody calls us in, we can't go in and mandate, as long as they're compliant within the code, which will be interesting to see, fire code or whatever the venue code is, then we don't really have anything to do there unless they need us. We were just trying to let them know, hey, we're putting you on notice. You got problems. So, you can't sue the city. Obviously, they have sovereign immunity. They're going to sit back there and go, you can't sue us for jack.
Right.
But that clearly, there's just so many problems that are going to come from that. And obviously you just have your heart goes out to those family members and those people who experience that. So it's just going to be a long, arduous journey for them and kind of through the courts and what happens.
Yeah. And I guess Travis Scott's a famous famous rapper, but he doesn't have $1 billion. So
right, exactly.
It would be interesting to see. I'm assuming the big deep pockets defendant here is going to probably try to be NRG, which is where they'll try to get the bulk of the money from. I would assume, is they're going to have to say there's some sort of crowd control issue or security issue, and I guess the security company that was providing security or allowing people to crash the gate or whatever happened will be the ones that have to do the most fighting.
Yeah. I mean,
but I mean, a lot of times the plaintiff's attorneys will throw in a big lawsuit with a huge number, in there and settle for 10% of that. But sure. 10% of 700, still $75 million. I mean, that's still, it's still a lot of money, and you can't put a price on a human life. So especially a 9-year-old kid.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, nothing but devastation in there, I think, for all parties involved. But it's going to be interesting to see kind of what transpires and what information comes of it. And like I said, I'm sure we'll be watching it on Netflix or Hulu or something pretty soon.
Yeah, we'll get the documentary rights.
Oh yeah, everybody's swarming.
Right. So that covers the latest goings on down here in Houston, unfortunately. Like I said, I think Travis Scott is trying to do a lot for the city and and things like that. And it's just unfortunate when you have a tragedy that comes out of something like this. Him putting together this thing, just trying to, really just obviously trying to make some money, but at the same time trying to revitalize, Houston and, his hometown and all of that. And so it just kind of sucks that it turned out this way.
No, I agree.
And so, all right, so let's move on to, you want to cover the vaccine mandates or Kyle Rittenhouse? I mean, both of them are very exciting.
Dealer's choice. We'll go.
All right, well, let's hit let's hit the vaccine mandate. So, obviously, Joe Biden, the Biden administration, the former vice president, instituted, I guess, OSHA regulations that required employers of 100 or more employees to mandate vaccines for their employees under using OSHA regulations. So I guess they're equating the getting a needle jab with wearing a hard hat on a work site, right?
No.
But anyway, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals issued a stay on that vaccine mandate. So, and then I guess the former vice president decided that he didn't want to follow that, and then I guess over the weekend, the Fifth Circuit said, no, we really mean it. It's nationwide. So, I don't know how you feel about vaccine mandates. I'm certainly not anti-vaccine by any stretch of the imagination. I got it. You got it. I am anti-vaccine mandate, though. So, in this country, I am at least.
Yeah, and I think that the court has the right interpretation. I'm not going to, deny it was a creative way to try to circumvent kind of the law that's in place and kind of, how you attack, a large percentage of the population that seems to be unwilling to, want a mandate or want a vaccine.
I think that was that not the Texas lawsuit? Was the one that the Fifth Circuit decided?
I think it was.
Or was it? I think it might have been 12 states involved.
I know there were a lot of people all joined in.
That was the Louisiana lawsuit, I think. But there's another number of states that joined in. I think 12 states. But Missouri filed another lawsuit, which included 10 states. So I guess that's 22 states. So there's no way this thing's not going to the Supreme Court to be decided. And I guess that the legal question in this situation is whether or not, they can force whether it's constitutional to force a vaccine mandate from the federal government. My read on the case law is that I think states or potentially local areas could potentially force a vaccine mandate, but I don't know if the federal government can. That may be outside the scope of the federal government's power.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's definitely, pushing the boundaries of really an executive mandate. The challenge is, there are balances, checks and balances between the branches of government. You and I have gone through this. Obviously, every president that's been in there has freaking tested it.
Sure.
You know, sometimes Congress tests it, sometimes the courts test it. And this is just another opportunity, I think, that the executive branch really kind of, COVID has presented this unique situation. It was there for President Trump. It's there for President Biden. They're all trying to say, like, we want to be able to dictate what everybody does. And at times try to circumvent the Constitution and really those checks and balances. And I really agree with you. I think that it is a step too far. I think that that's what the courts are going to say. It'll be interesting to see with the conservative Supreme Court how they approach OSHA regulations. Are an interesting kind of thing because obviously the states have to comply with OSHA regulations.
Right, and typically OSHA regulations are they not decided in another more administrative type of body, not necessarily a court. It's not an OSHA court, but it's more of an administrative court. I know that can still be appealed to the Supreme Court, but a lot of times the Supreme Court leaves that stuff alone. But I think trying to, like you said, it's kind of a clever way to try to bring it under the under the OSHA regulations. But I don't think occupational safety is the same as a vaccine. I think there's a level of difference there. But the if the OSHA regulation, the mandate was pretty significant. So if you had 100 or more employees, you face $14,000 fine per violation. So if you had 100 times 14,000, I mean, you could be out of business if you decide to defy our federal overlords, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's some pretty big companies in Texas that were wrestling with it, most significantly. And I think that the ones that people would know, pretty handily, American Airlines, Southwest Airlines, these are based, out of Texas, and they have a large number of employees. And so, you're talking about, and these are unionized employees. So, every union is up in arms saying, like, you can't do this. And anyways, even if you wanted to, that really needs to come from the state. Well, Texas is one of those states that's like, that'll never freaking happen. So, I understand the complexity of what each one of these groups is trying to deal with, right? It's hard, personal freedom is at the heart of our Constitution. I feel like you and I have had those conversations before. And I understand too that, when you talk about public health, that's something that affects all of us. And so does somebody's personal freedom weigh heavier than your ability to, maintain a healthy environment for your family, your children? I mean, these are tough subjects that the courts are wrestling with. And I think that everybody's pushing those boundaries. I think the courts have a very difficult decision to make because the implications are very far reaching, not just about pandemics and COVID vaccines, but it's really a very, very intense scrutinization of the Constitution and its applicability between the branches. And does the court really check the strength of the executive branch at this point and say, you don't have the ability to do that, you're overreaching? That's really Congress's. You want something like that, fine. Let Congress enact some legislation, and if you want to sign it in act, great, because the people have spoken. But where does that threshold happen?
I don't know. The other thing, I mean, obviously 27 states have decided that they don't like this, and they're filing lawsuits. There's Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Those all have Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, all have cases. Ninth Circuit all have cases pending, and the 11th Circuit all have cases pending, involving vaccine mandates. I think it goes to the heart of a lot of things that are significant about this COVID argument. You've got, whether or not that's a true vaccine in the sense of the word. It doesn't cure people, or it doesn't keep people from getting anything. So it's not technically, I guess the CDC has changed the definition of vaccine. So it's no longer like the, polio vaccine, which is an actual vaccine. I think this is more of a, get you less sick kind of vaccine, as opposed to, so. And then you've got another situation where they're starting to mandate vaccines on children ages 5 to 11, when the death rate on children of that age of COVID is next to nothing. I mean, you might have more risk from the vaccine than you do have from the COVID. I mean, based on the numbers, it's, you definitely have more risk from seasonal flu as a child than you do from COVID. The numbers are statistically zero, but they are mandating that now. I mean, in certain states are and certain school districts are starting to mandate it. It's a tough a tough call, because are you going to throw kids out of school because they're not vaccinated? I know it's a hot button issue, and it's very emotional for people, because you've got crazies from the right saying they're putting stuff in the vaccines. They're
tracking us. They're tracking us. Dang it.
And then you got
now they can
crazies.
find me.
They got crazies from the left saying, well, if you don't get vaccinated, you're trying to murder me. So it's you got to find some sense to this. I mean, some reasonableness to all of this. So I don't think these vaccines are full of nanotech that's tracking us. And I also don't think that anyone who doesn't take a vaccine is trying to murder another person. I personally don't have a problem with vaccines. I think I think obviously vaccines have contributed over the course of history to a number of
world. Sure.
A number of longer life expectancies for a number of people. I mean, nobody wants to live through a mumps outbreak. I can promise you that. So vaccines are important where that's concerned. Right. But at the same time, I mean, personal freedom is one of the foundational things of our country. So, if you want to choose to be unhealthy, I think you have the right to do that. And I'm not saying you're unhealthy for not getting a vaccine, but if you want to choose your personal decisions over getting some type of medical treatment, I think you do have the right, in a free country to decline medical treatment if you so choose. I don't know that there's a public good that overrides that personal freedom.
That's the kicker right there, public good, right? So I think what the courts have ruled in the past is that there is this element, this public good element, that if they can show, hey, you know what, doing this protects a large majority of the population, then you have the right to do it as a government. And that's where these mandates are coming in. But I would tell you, Brian, you're right. The challenge is not, in my opinion, law, because obviously this is ever shifting sand. It's, as a people, as a country, man, we couldn't be further apart about 100 different subjects, and this is one of them. It's there's no middle ground. There's no understanding. It's like a fist fight every time anybody gets into any kind of conversation. It's just we've become so polarized on all topics, not just this topic, so many topics. And what makes that challenging is that without any type of room to compromise, because it's either black or it's white, then this is where everything is playing out. So the role of the courts has become fundamentally so much more important than I think it's ever been, really, since probably early on in our country's history. Because really, through the 60s, maybe early on when our country was early in its foundation period, the courts making these determinations are really at the heart of what does liberty mean? What does personal freedom mean? What does it get balanced against? What laws can really brush up against these rights that are inherent in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights? These are extremely complicated legal theories that the average Joe has no understanding of how those things interrelate to one another. They just basically look at it and say, it's
I'll do you one better. I mean, I think the part of the problem with so much civil unrest is sometimes courts not tackling some of these issues and deciding one way or another. So if a court declines to hear something on a jurisdictional issue or some sort of procedural technicality, I mean, the Supreme Court obviously doesn't have to take up any of these cases if they choose not to. Mm-hmm. Then you start leading to more and more unrest because states start doing whatever they want, then if you've got a bright line rule that we can all follow, you may not agree with it, but it does help keep the peace, as opposed to, a free for all whenever everybody's, the court didn't decide it, so I'm right. You're right. I don't know. I'm right. That kind of thing.
It goes right back to them. To your point, we end up right back in the same place. It just, a lot of people get hurt in that interim between, hey, I didn't do anything, and now it's back up in your face. I mean, I'm with you. Like I said, super complicated issues. It'll be interesting to see how the law plays out. Our Supreme Court right now is challenged with some, they always have these super important cases, but this court has some monster issues in front of it.
Yeah, they got that Second Amendment case, and they've got
abortion case.
They got this case.
They've got
too,
the COVID case. They've got there's just a lot of very hot pokers in that fire.
And the other thing is, the other thing that I've been kind of thinking about is our society has changed so much with the mobility of society. And I'm not saying that this is a reason to, curtail anybody's freedoms or anything like that, but we're so much more mobile as in a society now. So you can get on a plane, from DFW today, and you can be in Tokyo in 14 hours. And, you can be on the other side of the world in 24. And so things like pandemics and things like that can spread so much faster nowadays than they ever could, before. And so I'm not saying that that's a reason for the government to come down on people and say, you have to do this or you have to do that. But, it is something to keep in mind that there's, whenever Trump, rightly or wrongly, when Trump issued that travel mandate in January of 2020 from China, there were 22 to 25,000 people coming in from China every day to, LAX, LaGuardia or JFK or SFO. That's just people landing, at airports. So people, spreading a very fast spreading communicable disease can happen very quickly. Now, should we have had all of these lockdowns and all of these things like that? That's obviously a debatable issue. I don't know that, that's necessarily what we need to get into, but, if you're then requiring everybody to get a vaccine that, some people have some problems with the way the vaccine was created. The research behind it, some people don't believe the vaccine is, very helpful. I don't personally feel it was very helpful. I had it and I also got COVID. So, I don't personally feel the vaccine helped me very much, but some people swear by them. And, I don't know that it's a true vaccine in the sense of the word, so that you have to force everyone to get inoculated. But it's like I said, it's not like polio where the vaccine stopped polio. They stopped polio, or smallpox vaccine that stopped it dead in its tracks. It's just not that easy. And then you're forcing. I don't like the idea of the federal government being able to force employers to force their employees to get to get medical treatment that they don't want. I think that's a lot different than forcing somebody to be safe on a work site, wear the proper protective equipment, or have, certain standards at a work site where, so you're not going to get, you're not going to get injured or, maimed or killed. There's a world of difference, I think, between the two things. I think it's a nice try, but no thanks.
Yeah, I do think that there's some regulations that have to be in place. Obviously, I think if you're COVID positive and you're going to go to a work site and you're going to get everybody else freaking sick, you're a fucking idiot. But, in that, does the federal government need to tell us that? I don't think so. I think a state government, a local government can say, hey, look, here's COVID protocols because we want to keep our, small population or larger population safe.
And it's maybe safer for the local government or the state government to do it. That the one vaccination case was in a local area in Massachusetts, right? So and it may be better for, there isn't a one size fits all for every local community. What if you're in a farming community and your closest neighbor is 7 miles away? You're unlikely to. COVID doesn't travel 7 miles. So forcing that person to get vaccinated is not necessarily the smartest thing. And like I said, people have, the United States is a country where people have many differing beliefs. Certain religious beliefs call for no vaccinations of any kind, and sure. that's your right to believe that. And that's your right to follow that religion if you so choose. So, forcing somebody like that to be fired from their job if they don't get a vaccine seems very un-American to me.
No, I definitely think that that's the complexity of this particular issue is, when you look at it and you say, as a local government or as a federal government, we want our people to be healthy, we want them to be safe. Okay, you also want them to be free, and that's what the Constitution says. The right to life, liberty. These two things don't always match up, right?
Right.
So that's the issue that is really complicated, is which weighs heavier? Is it liberty that weighs heavier than life? Is it life that weighs heavier than liberty? And I know that's very generic, but that's the heart of this conversation that we're having. And then you layer on the complexity of the law, which is in written word. Well, frickin', I could write an email right now, brother, and we would read it two different ways. You know what I'm saying? And we're fairly educated individuals.
Well,
so when
you
you
are.
talk about, yeah, right. So when you talk about, the American public, this melting pot that it's become of personalities, of perspectives, of education, of this social history that we drag into these conversations. I mean, it's not easy. It's not the solution that a court comes up with, no matter what they do, it's going to be heavily criticized, and it may inspire, legislation. So, this is, what they're wrestling with. Is it judicial activism, right? Or do they adhere to the Constitution and say, no, we're going to be, strict interpretists and say, this is what the Constitution says. And so that's what we're going to apply. So getting it as high as it is really important, because I think that's the heart of the conversation that's going to be decided.
I guess I get the thing that really irritates me about all of this is if there was some sort of kind of defined characteristics that this virus, displays, or or things that happen. It seems that there's so much misinformation out there about, well, if you're 6 feet away, you won't transmit it to someone else, but if you're sitting right next to them, you will, or if you come into contact with anybody who has it or has been exposed, you're likely to get, if there was some settled science on how it's transmitted, what the treatment protocols are, how long you should. Heck, I've seen, stay away until you're COVID negative. I've heard, nope, automatically 14-day quarantine. I mean, just on, if you've been exposed to it. So I guess what I'm trying to say, the thing that irks me is if we had some definitive, I know they generally know how it's transmitted. If we had some, general guidelines that made sense about, where this is all going or what we needed to do, to stay safe, I think that would be, I think people would be much more receptive. But there's so much misinformation out there about how it's transmitted, what you get, whether you're really safe with the vaccine. Some people say it's 80% effective. Some people say it's 50% effective. Some people say it's not effective. If we had something to make it a little bit more clear, and I think that's why maybe it's better for state and local governments to be looking at this stuff, because, there is a county health department for a reason. There is, state medical boards for a reason. There is, states have regulations on all of that stuff. So if your state doesn't necessarily want to, impose a vaccine mandate, they shouldn't have to.
Yeah, I mean, those are all like I said, I agree with you, Brian. I think it's going to be it's just an interesting time to deal with.
Disinformation or misinformation, but there's a lot of, you find me a pundit and you can find a different opinion on this stuff. Unfortunately, dude, find me a talking head on the TV, and you can find a different opinion, right?
There you go. It's a digital age. It's a digital age. You want to prove something, just prove it. There's 100 ways to do it. So it just makes it tough for people to figure out what's really happening.
And regardless of your feelings on the, the pandemic and what you think of it, that, obviously, you want people to be safe and you want as few people to die from this thing as possible. Most people feel that way. I don't think anybody's out there actively trying to spread COVID. That's not a completely insane person. I think so. No one, I think, is out there actively trying to spread it. I think, but at the same time, like you said, how do you curtail their personal freedoms? You can't just say everybody's got to shut down. I think that's been proven not to work. So, I mean, if you want to look at Australia, it seems to be getting worse and worse. And, they seem to get more restrictive and more restrictive. So it's just heartbreaking, the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway,
I agree.
All right. So let's move to a less controversial topic, the Kyle Rittenhouse case. Before we came on to record here, I thought, we were going to look at, hopefully, some sort of resolution to this case. I guess we're still on verdict watch, right? As of right now.
Yeah, nothing yet. Third day of deliberation by the jury. It's definitely going to be something that I think we're going to spend some time on when the the jury comes out with its verdict. But I mean, it's an interesting case because obviously it ties up into what it's become is a Second Amendment case, but it's really not a Second Amendment case in my opinion. I mean, as you look at the situation, that he created a situation, that he put himself in that situation, is irrelevant to, does he have the right to possess that firearm in the state and locality in which he was in? And, so it really becomes just a simple crime. Or was it a crime at all? Do you have the right to defend yourself? At what point in time, like in Texas, we have the castle doctrine, right? So it means like basically that you don't have to retreat. You can stand your ground. You stand your ground.
I think this case is honestly, I think this case is going to define a lot with respect to self-defense law for a long, long time. I think like you said, I think it's a self-defense case. It's, that's obviously the indictment is for murder. His defense is self-defense. No one's disputing that he killed the people. And so the discussion now is whether or not he acted in whether he felt the threat was reasonable enough that he was authorized to use deadly force, right?
Yeah. And this really goes to the heart of, there's a lot of states that are having these kinds of interactions, right? So another good state is Arizona, right? So these are, there's militias in Arizona that patrol the border. And so in those situations, they're fully armed, they get into an encounter, do they have the right to use lethal force? That is not Second Amendment, guys. Second Amendment is not what's at issue in the Rittenhouse case. What it is what we just talked about, self-defense. When you have the right to use lethal force in defending yourself or someone else or personal property. Every state has different legislation. Every state takes a little different tact on it.
I think you're right. I do think the left is trying to make this about an AR-15 and a gun grab. And anytime there's a shooting like this, it always seems to be an excuse for a gun grab. But you're right. It's not a possession of firearms case. They dropped the firearm charge against him. So they literally are not pursuing any kind of that he didn't have a lawful right to carry that weapon. I mean, you can question all day and all night whether it was a smart decision for him, a 17-year-old kid, to go out and, try helping people or rushing graffiti off walls or, trying to help provide security for a car lot. That may or may not be a stupid decision, but I mean, I guess you're allowed to make stupid decisions. I guess in that moment, does he have the right to defend himself if he believes his life is being threatened, which he obviously is testifying that he did. And what I also think is very interesting about this case is I'm almost shocked it hasn't ended in a mistrial. I mean, I think the prosecution, in my opinion, and I've watched a fair amount of this trial, I think the prosecution in this trial has been awful. I mean, they're hiding. I mean, they're very, very close to skirting the Brady rule and then hiding evidence and not just, they're giving the defense one, like the FBI drone footage, which I think is the clearest footage of this whole interaction. They give the defense a grainy, not clear version, but they bring an HD version to court, that they don't turn over. I mean, stuff like that is, this prosecution seems bad. I mean, it seems like they're ethically very challenged, I guess is the most delicate way I can put it. And then that leads me to another question. Does this case ever even brought in Texas? I mean, I don't know that it is.
Well, I mean, everybody wants to talk about the race card. And I think if, I do think that if he was a minority, this case would be happening a little differently. But that aside, I would tell you that I agree with you wholeheartedly. And so for people who are listening, Brady or watching, Brady is about exculpatory evidence, right? So this landmark case basically said the prosecution has an affirmative obligation to turn over the evidence, all of it. And so the fact that, prosecutors do this all the time as a criminal defense attorney, they do this all the time. They basically sift through the evidence to say, well, this is really the evidence that you need as a defense. But that's not their obligation. Their obligation under this case is you have to turn it all over and we'll decide what's important and what's not important to the defense. So the fact that they're trying to limit it or mitigate it or, give them different versions, now the HD one is interesting to me in a digital age because obviously right now we know that, it could be a still frame that makes a difference in a case. And an
Sure.
HD version, what you can see as opposed to not HD version, definitely, I think, puts the defense at a disadvantage. Is it enough, in this situation for a court to say, yeah, these violations create, mistrial? I don't know. Honestly, if I was this kid, I would probably hope for not a mistrial, because I agree with you. I think the prosecution has done a pretty piss poor job. And so it really,
I mean, you don't want a mistrial because you don't want to have to try the thing again. That's ultimately what happens in a hung jury or a mistrial.
I know that, I get the defense's strategy, though. They're like, hey, we want to throw everything out there in case the jury comes back with something that's not favorable to the client. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that the way this situation has presented itself and the way the prosecution has handled the case, is really, good for the defense. I think it puts them in the best position they could possibly be in.
I mean, my personal opinion on this thing is, the scary part about it is it's got a lot. There's a lot of video footage on this thing about showing what he did. A lot of pictures, a lot of potentially exculpatory video and pictures of showing the events of that night. So what happens in a situation where there's not that video footage, when it's your word against someone else's in a self-defense case? There's there's eyewitnesses, and there's also a lot of footage. There's obviously a picture of a guy holding a Glock, just starting to point a Glock in the guy's in his face. Is that a situation where you have the right to defend yourself if somebody's pointing a loaded gun at you? Yeah, I think it is. But think about situations where there's not going to be all this camera footage, and there's not going to be, it becomes your word against someone else's. I mean, in a self-defense case, you have to view the threat as being potentially lethal to you, to cause death or serious bodily harm, in order to use, lethal force. And, one thing I didn't understand about the case is, why didn't they let them bring in the background of some of these, some of the assailants that were kicking him and hitting him and coming after him? Because I do think that is a little bit relevant to, I guess, if he knew that they were criminals.
Right. It would only be relevant if he knew in advance, which he didn't. He'd never met these people. He'd never had any kind of encounters with them other than the night in question. So, that really becomes inflammatory to a jury who listens and says, oh, he was a convicted felon and had been, had 2 protective orders against him. So he's naturally violent. So obviously you had the ability to defend yourself. You just got to kind of take him in that snapshot of time. But what you and I have talked about many times in relation to firearms and using deadly force is, look, the one piece of advice I would give all of our listeners: you are entitled to arm yourself in most states, okay? But remember that the use of that
firearm, if you're a prosecutor in Kenosha, Wisconsin, I don't know that you do have the right to, arm yourself.
In most states. But I would tell you, here's the challenge. Arming yourself and using those firearms guarantees that you're going to go through a situation like this guy's going through. And irrespective of if you believe he did it, he was justified, or he was out to murder somebody because he wanted to shoot his gun, I promise you discharge that weapon, whether you kill somebody or not, you're going to end up in legal proceedings. You're going to be pulled up in front of a grand jury. You're going to have to hire legal counsel. So you better know what the hell you're doing. You better know the law as it applies to you in relation to that firearm and self-defense in whatever environment that you're in. If you don't know, talk to a lawyer, get some advice. Don't just Google it. I mean, spend some time, because, whether you're, like in Texas now, we don't have to have a concealed handgun license to be able to carry a firearm. We're an open carry state anyway, so you could just put it on your hip and walk around. I'm going to tell you what, you pull it out of that with an intention to use it, you better know that your life is about to change dramatically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's when you introduce firearms into these situations, look, and I'm not sitting here saying he should have let himself get, beat to death with a skateboard, or, shot from behind a parked car or anything like that. I do think he has the right to defend himself, but at the same time, that probably better be your last option, and based on the drone footage, it looks like that was probably his last option.
Yeah,
there was an attorney talking on TV yesterday, and he was talking about, I guess he was pretty prominent criminal defense attorney, and he said, in a self-defense case with these facts, this is almost the best self-defense case you can have with this set of facts, because Oftentimes they're not clear. They're not as clear as this, this could potentially be. You've got, four multiple assailants attacking this guy, some of them with loaded weapons, and backing him in a corner or getting him on the ground and things like that. So, it's a little bit more clear cut of a self-defense case than I guess a lot of instances.
Yeah, and I think that helps him on the murder charge for sure. Obviously, Wisconsin has some different laws that there's some lesser and included offenses in there that I don't know if it's going to stand up quite as well, those facts. But, that's really the kicker is, obviously he doesn't want to lose his life for trying to defend it. He
Right.
feels that he was justified in what he did. I would just tell anybody who is observing that trial is to really pay attention to, even if these facts are the best, even if it looks clear cut, it's highly likely that this guy was still going to have to go through this process just like he is right now.
Well, the other thing that the other unintended consequence of something like this is you have to use your weapon and kill somebody in self-defense. You don't know the type of toll that takes on you, on your personal, mental health, having to take somebody's life. Especially if you're a 17-year-old kid. I don't know that he's, based on, his breaking down on the stand, I don't know that he wasn't, he isn't regretful about what happened, whether he had a choice or not. I don't know that he's not regretful about what happened. I mean, nobody wants to get into a situation where, you have a gun, I have guns. I don't want to get into a situation where I have to use it. I really don't. I dread the day that happens. I don't want to have to kill somebody. I mean, that what kind of toll that takes on you personally. Everybody loses.
I agree. It's a no-win situation.
And then, like you said, you kill somebody in self-defense, you are involved in a legal proceeding. Whatever that, however that looks. It might be, you getting convicted of murder. It might be, them having an investigation and deciding that yes, it was justified. But either way, it's going to be investigated, and either way, your life is going to change.
Yeah, and it's two-part prong, inquiry, right? There's the objective part, and then there's the subjective part. And when people hear that, they're like, "Well, what are you saying, Sam?" I'm saying, like, well, the objective part is here's a situation that we can observe. The subjective part, was that enough for you to believe what you believe? And these are complicated issues when you try to break it down to the minuscule moments of what somebody's interpreting somebody else is doing and their intentions. And to your point, Brian, like there's no take backs, right? You
Right.
do something like this and you're changed forever, and whether you get off or not. So this kid, his life is,
I think
fundamentally gonna be a wreck.
I think the enduring image of this trial is going to be that moronic prosecutor that looks like the guy from Littlefinger from Game of Thrones up there with holding a rifle pointed at the jury. I mean, I think that's going to be probably the enduring image of this thing. I've seen that thing on the internet, that picture of that guy holding that rifle up, at least 100 different news stories on this thing. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a crazy world we're living in, brother.
It sure is. Well, we've covered a lot. So
you said it was going to be a megalodon episode, so you're right.
We've been at this a while. So, you got any parting thoughts? You have any exciting Thanksgiving plans? Anything you want to tell us about?
All I'm gonna tell you is that I'll be in a calorie narcosis watching the Cowboys win. So that's all that's coming up for me.
Cowboys are definitely having a good season this year. They are definitely on the good side. So they got the big Kansas City matchup, and then 4 days later they're playing again. Their annual tough part of the schedule, right?
Yeah. So if we can make it out with at least one win, I think we'll be in a good spot.
Yeah, should be exciting. But wish you and your family the safest and happiest of Thanksgivings.
Ditto, brother. Ditto. Eat a big turkey leg for me.
I carry my turkey leg around while I go into a food coma watching football. But no, how do people want to reach out to you? How do they get a hold of you?
Sure. If you're in the Miami area or in Dallas-Fort Worth area, North Texas, you can reach me directly. 817-914-5470. You can reach our office at 469-844-7181, or you can send me an email at ssanchez@astxlegal.com. Always visit our website, www.astxlegal.com.
Yeah, you can contact us directly on the website. You can also see the other episodes of this podcast that are slightly less long on the website. They're all there. You can contact me at 281-374-4741 or at babercrombie@astxlegal.com. You can also reach me on the website as well. So if you've got legal questions or you need some help with something, we can certainly talk to you. But thanks for the time today, Sam. I appreciate you as always.
All good, bro.
And have a happy Thanksgiving. And we're definitely going to make this. We decided to make this a longer episode this time so we could cover a lot of ground since we've been on hiatus. But we're definitely going to be more consistent with our shows. So we'll be hitting this thing once a week going forward. So everybody have a safe and happy holiday, and we wish you all the best.
Yes, sir.